The quote, "Trump is effed." And that was the quote that came from a text message that Stormy Daniels' former attorney sent to the National Enquirer right after the infamous Access Hollywood tape was released. That was part of key testimony in Trump's New York criminal trial. I was in the courtroom today. It's a small room. It's a quite intimate space where Daniels' former attorney, Keith Davidson, sat 15 feet or so away from Trump and spoke directly to the jury, laying out to them the sleazy back and forth negotiations over hush money payments that are at the heart of this case. Now, Davidson was very clear that the payments to the Playboy model Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels were made to influence the election. The prosecutor asking Davidson at one point, and this is the quote I wrote down, "Is it safe to assume from your joke that you had an understanding that if you were to close your deal, this would somehow benefit the candidate Donald Trump?" Davidson's one-word reply, "Yes." And he laid it out again and again, making it clear that he knew that this would influence the election and telling the jury that he believes Trump was behind it. Now, I was watching Trump and the jury today in the courtroom. As I said, a small space. Everybody is very close to each other. It's very personal. 4 witnesses and nearly 4 hours of testimony, and the jury paid attention the whole time. Some taking notes, most, though, from what I could see, just turning their heads to listen to the questions and then turning their head to listen to the answers, back and forth and fully engaged, sometimes looking at the screens in front of them to actually peer at very specific documents. And one thing that stood out to me was actually that they never noticeably ever looked at Trump. Even when they walked in and out of the courtroom, and I saw that about 4 times in total, I did not see any of them turn to look at him, even though they walk right in front of him as he's standing there. As for Trump, he also paid attention, sometimes listening with his arms folded, head tilted back, as you've heard. Sometimes he fully leaned back in his seat with his legs stretched out. He often spoke to his attorneys, but the time that he was most engaged that I witnessed was when a witness from C-SPAN was testifying. The witness confirming that Trump had spoken at various rallies. And then the prosecution played tapes from those rallies, including this one.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. Total fabrication.
Now, at that point, when that started playing, it's short, and they played a few, Trump leans forward. He puts his face right close to the television monitor on the desk in front of him. He was riveted. Watching Trump was his most engaged and intense moment of the trial today that I saw. Meantime, when the story shifts to Stormy Daniels by name, Trump's lips were pursed. His disdain for Daniels, of course, coming as he has repeatedly attacked her despite a gag order. His supporters have threatened her and her family. Some of the attacks so vile, I will not repeat them on air, but in a moment, I will speak exclusively to Daniels' bodyguard. And tonight, the judge in the case putting Trump on notice because of some of those attacks, warning Trump to stop violating the gag order or face time behind bars. That warning came after Trump was fined $9,000 in the courtroom this morning for making public comments about jurors and witnesses. What was interesting in this is watching Trump as the judge fined him for every violation. It didn't bat an eye. The former president was completely stoic from my vantage point. Paula Reed is out front live outside the courthouse to begin our coverage tonight. And Paula, what stood out to you most today?
Well, Aaron, the day began with reports of tension between Trump and his legal team. I'm told everything is fine between him and his attorney, Todd Blanche. And as you saw in court today, the two men appear to be completely aligned as they heard from several witnesses, including one that could really matter for this case, the man who represented 2 women who say they had affairs with Trump.
Today, jurors in the hush money case against former President Trump heard from a lawyer who represented 2 women who allegedly had affairs with him while he was married. Keith Davidson represented both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. He explained to the jury how he sought deals with the National Enquirer for both of his clients. He told the jury how the release of the Trump Access Hollywood tape suddenly drove up interest in Daniels' story.
I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet.
The jury was shown texts that Davidson sent to former National Enquirer editor Dylan Howard about both Daniels and McDougal. Of McDougal, Davidson texted, "I have a blockbuster Trump story." Howard responded, "Talk first thing. I will get you more than anyone for it. You know why." Davidson and McDougal were in conversation with ABC News about sharing her story, he testified, but McDougal did not want to tell her story and preferred the deal with the National Enquirer, which would have kept her story from the public. At one point, while Davidson and Howard were negotiating, Davidson wrote, "Throw in an ambassadorship for me. I'm thinking Isle of Man." He said that text was a joke about Trump's presidential run, that somehow if Karen did this deal for AMI, the publisher of the National Enquirer, that it would help Donald Trump's candidacy. Davidson said he received a hefty 45% of McDougal's $150,000 deal. Earlier in the day, prosecutors questioned other witnesses, like Michael Cohen's former banker, Gary Farrow, who provided details about a different hush money payment that was made to Stormy Daniels by Michael Cohen. Trump was seen leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed several times during Farrow's testimony. Prosecutors also briefly called the executive director of C-SPAN's archives to the stand. His testimony was used to enter videos of Trump into evidence.
As you have seen, right now I am being viciously attacked with lies and smears. It's a phony deal. I have no idea who these women are.
And before all the day's testimony began, Judge Juan Merchan ruled Trump must pay $9,000 for violating the gag order put in place at the start of the trial. The judge ruled Trump violated the gag order 9 times and charged him $1,000 per violation and ordered him to take down the offending post by the afternoon, which Trump did. The judge raised the possibility of jail time if Trump continues to violate the gag order, stating, "Therefore, defendant is hereby warned that the court will not tolerate continued willful violations of its lawful orders and that if necessary and appropriate under the circumstances, it will impose an incarceratory punishment."
After court, Trump made additional comments that all appeared to be within the bounds of his gag order. But when we're back in court on Thursday, the day will start with another hearing on what prosecutors say are 4 additional violations of the gag order. But Aaron, I'll note that these all occurred before Trump was fined $9,000 and threatened with jail. So too soon to say if that is having a deterrent effect.
Right, absolutely, and he did remove the posts at least relevant to what he was punished for today. All right, Paula, thank you very much. Our experts are here with me. So Terry Austin, you and I sat together inside the courtroom, and you have been there every single day. You're a former trial attorney. So how was, in that context, how did you see Keith Davidson's testimony? He, of course, is the lawyer who represented both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal.
Aaron, I think he's been the best so far. He walked into that courtroom, he was very confident. He got on that stand, he answered the questions, and he was very detailed about it. And he was funny, he made jokes. You mentioned one of the jokes that he made, the Isle of Man, and I definitely think the jury was listening to him. He was extremely credible, and he gave a lot of details about both the Stormy Daniels case and about the Karen McDougal case.
Yeah, and he turned towards the jury. I mean, he's a lawyer. He knew what he was doing. I mean, not that others didn't, but he was very purposeful in his take the question and really present to them.
Absolutely.
All right, so Ryan, there was another moment that stood out to me. Michael Cohen's banker was testifying, completing his testimony. The prosecution's going document by document how Michael Cohen set up a new corporation. And what was the purpose for the corporation? They show documents, and again, the jury's watching this so carefully. What did Michael Cohen say the purpose of the new corporation was? Real estate consulting. What was the purpose of the wire to Daniels' attorney? Retainer. Then the prosecutor asked Cohen's banker if Michael Cohen had indicated the funds would be used to pay an adult film star, as opposed to real estate consulting, would this all have happened? The corporation had been opened so quickly, the money transferred and wired out. The answer was unequivocal. That is an industry we do not work with. Mm-hmm. So how far does this go to proving the falsification of documents that are so central to the case?
Well, it certainly proves that the scheme was being used. They were using shell companies. They were using all sorts of falsities with the banks and otherwise. So that was from the get-go. Now, the problem is that right now, that's just Michael Cohen.
Right.
And the big question for this trial is whether or not the prosecutors can prove that Donald Trump himself knew that business records were being falsified to cover up the entire scheme. But those are the business records inside the Trump organization. But this is a very good lead into that particular part of it.
So we don't know what they have, Joey, but certainly today they presented a good case for Michael Cohen providing false representation, but not Donald Trump.
Yeah, without question. And aerial view, Aaron, I'm fascinated by your description of the volley between the jurors focusing on the answers and the questions.
They really were. They were, yeah.
And that's critical, and not looking at Trump. And that's important. Trump's not providing testimony, right? What the testimony's coming from the witnesses shows to me they're paying attention, keeping an open mind. People have their minds made up, are doing anything but listening to testimony. But look, on the issue of establishing the deal being what? He represented the attorney Davidson, who was testifying today. He represented Stormy Daniels, right? Certainly represented Karen McDougal, had a lot to say about his interactions with Michael Cohen. What I would anticipate is the defense's argument that, listen, that's great as to your relations with Michael Cohen. What about Donald Trump? You didn't interact with him at all, did you? You were interacting with Michael Cohen. You have no knowledge with respect to any conversations that took place between Trump and Cohen. You don't know what at all they were discussing at any time because you weren't there. So fascinating as to their interaction, Cohen and Davidson, who didn't have such great things to say about Cohen, by the way, right?
No.
Calling him things I can't repeat. But we'll see what the defense does, certainly in closing argument, seizing upon that to say Trump was nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be found, and had nothing to do with this.
That's what they're going to try to say. All right.